Almost every exporter, trader, or sourcing company approaches buyers the wrong way. If your first message contains your product, you've probably already lost. And the biggest mistake in international trade is not choosing the wrong product. It is believing that buyers are waiting for your offer. In this video, I want to show you 3 things. First, why most buyer outreach fails before the conversation even starts. Second, why buyers do not want your product, your catalog, or your sales pitch. And third, how to approach potential buyers in a way that builds trust, creates real conversations, and helps you understand what they actually need. My name is Gazki. I'm the Managing Director of Gazki Limited. Since 2012, we've been building and managing international trade flows of physical industrial products as well as professional business services between Ukraine and over 25 countries across the world. After more than 14 years in international trade, I can tell you one thing clearly. The best deals almost never start with a pitch. They start with curiosity. So first, we'll look at the mistake most people make. Then I'll show you the better alternative. And at the end, I'll give you the most important shift that can completely change how you approach buyers in international trade. Let's start with the mistake. Most people in international trade approach buyers like this. Hello, we are a manufacturer of this and this product. Hello, we can supply you this and that commodity. We have competitive prices. Please find attached our catalog. Hey, are you interested in buying? And I understand why people do this. They have a product, they have a supplier, they have a factory, they have an offer. So naturally, they think the job is to present that offer to as many buyers as possible. But here's the problem. Your potential buyer does not wake up in the morning thinking about your product. The buyer wakes up thinking about their own problems. They think about delayed deliveries, they think about unreliable suppliers, they think about quality issues, about cash flow, about complaints from their customers. They think about internal pressure from management, about logistics, customs, documentation, payment terms, and risk. And then your message arrives. Dear sir, we're pleased to introduce our company. To you, it may feel professional. To the buyer, it feels like more noise. And the buyers already have too much noise. Every day, they receive messages from exporters, traders, sourcing companies, brokers, agents, manufacturers, consultants, and people they have never heard of. Everyone wants to sell them something. Everyone claims they have the best product. Everyone says they are reliable. Everyone says they have competitive prices. So when you approach a buyer with a product before understanding their situation, you're not creating trust, you're creating resistance. And this is exactly why so many people in import-export say things like, I have a good product, but buyers do not reply. I contacted 100 companies, but nobody answered. I have suppliers, but I cannot find genuine buyers. People respond once, but the conversation does not continue. I don't know if the buyer is serious or fake. The problem is not only finding company names. The real struggle is finding genuine buyers, earning enough trust to move the conversation forward, turning that conversation into a real transaction. And I believe one of the reasons this happens is very simple. Most people are trying to sell before they understand. They are trying to offer before they diagnose. They are trying to convince before the buyer feels understood. But international trade does not work like that. International trade is B2B. And B2B trades is usually not a simple emotional purchase. There are longer decision chains. There are multiple people involved. There may be owners, purchasing managers, technical managers, finance departments, logistics people, customs brokers, warehouse managers, and customers. There is money at risk. There's reputation at risk. There are operational risks, delivery risks, and payment risks. So you cannot simply expect to present your product and have people say, yes, great, send me the invoice. That is not how serious trade flows are built. Trust comes first, but trust does not come from saying, trust me. Trust comes when the buyer feels this person actually understands my situation. This person is not just trying to push something. This person is asking the right questions. This person may be able to help me solve a real problem. That is the shift. Stop pitching, start diagnosing. I want to share a very practical learning curve from our own experience. In the past, we would often approach potential buyers starting with what we do. We manufacture, we supply, we can offer, we have experience, we can deliver. And of course, all of that may be true, but psychologically, the message is still about us. It says, we do this, we can provide that, we want to talk to you. Even if the message is polite, it feels like selling, just more politely. The better approach is completely different. The better approach starts with curiosity. Not we manufacture this, but I'm trying to understand how companies solve this problem. Not can we offer you our product, but how do you currently manage this process? Not are you interested in buying, but what usually creates the biggest difficulties in this area for you? This is a very different conversation because now your identity does not come first. Your product does not come first. Your solution does not come first. The buyer's reality comes first, and that changes everything. We've been doing international business for 14 years, and we're constantly learning, of course. In the beginning, our messages were talking mostly about ourselves, while the stronger outreach versions that we developed over the years started with research, curiosity, and the desire to understand how companies actually solve their problems in practice. That is the difference between selling and diagnosing. Selling says, here's what I have. Diagnosing says, help me understand what is happening on your side. Selling says, here's the solution. Diagnosing says, what problem is actually worth solving? Selling says, do you want to buy? Diagnosing says, what are you trying to improve, avoid, reduce, fix, or achieve? And this leads to the framework I want you to remember. Every serious buyer has two states. The first is the struggle state. The second is the progress state. The struggle state is where your buyer is now. It is the painful current situation. Maybe they are stuck with unreliable suppliers. Maybe they are losing money because of delays. Maybe their current sourcing process is too slow. Maybe their customers are complaining. Maybe their margins are under pressure. Maybe they cannot find a supplier who can meet their requirements. Maybe their current trade flow depends too much on one person, one contact, or one lucky opportunity. Maybe they are afraid of payment problems, fake buyers, fake suppliers, or execution mistakes. This is the struggle state. This is not just a problem. It is the current situation that creates pressure. The buyer feels stuck, exposed, delayed, uncertain, frustrated, or at risk. The progress state is different. The progress state is where the buyer wants to be. It is what mission accomplished looks like for them. Maybe they want a reliable supply. Maybe they want lower cost. Maybe they want faster delivery. Maybe they want fewer quality issues. Maybe they want safer payment terms. Maybe they want to complete their first safe international purchase. Maybe they want to stop depending on random opportunities and build a predictable system. Your job is to understand both. Where are they now? Where do they want to go? What is painful about the current situation? What would progress look like? What would change if the problem was solved? And what is the cost of staying where they are? This is where most exporters and traders fail. They know their product, but they do not know their buyer's struggle state. They know their price, but they do not know the buyer's progress state. They know their offer, but they do not understand what progress the buyer is actually trying to make. And if you do not understand that, you cannot build trust. You cannot position your offer properly. You cannot know whether your product is relevant. And you cannot know whether this is even a real opportunity. Because not every buyer is your buyer. Not every company has the problem you solve. Not every conversation should turn into an offer. And that is why diagnosis matters a lot. Now let's make this practical. How do you actually do this? Step 1. Do not open with your offer. This is the hardest part for many people because they feel that if they do not mention their product, the buyer will not understand what they are reaching out for. But the opposite is often true. When you open with the product, the buyer immediately puts you into the seller category. And once you're in that category, they become defensive. They start thinking, what does this person want from me? Is this another sales pitch? Do I have time for this? Can I ignore this? So instead of opening with the offer, open with the area of curiosity. For example, I'm currently trying to understand how companies in this sector manage this specific process. Or I'm speaking with operators in this industry to understand where the biggest challenges usually appear. Or I'm reaching out for research purposes on how manufacturing companies in your industry buy this product or service. This does not guarantee a reply, but psychologically, it is a much better entry point because you're not demanding attention, you're asking for perspective. And believe me, people hate getting pitched or sold, but they do love talking about themselves and sharing advice. Step 2, ask how they currently solve the problem, not what they want to buy, not whether they need your product, not whether they are interested in your company. Ask about the current process. For example, how do you currently manage this? How does this usually work in your company? How are these decisions usually made? What does the current process look like? These questions are powerful because they force you to understand reality before suggesting anything. And reality is always more complex than your assumptions. Maybe the buyer already has a supplier, maybe they solve the problem internally, maybe they buy locally, maybe they are not the decision maker, maybe the problem exists but it is not urgent, maybe the problem is even urgent but your product is not the solution. You do not know this until you ask. Step 3. Ask what is difficult, frustrating, unreliable, expensive, slow, or risky. This is where you start identifying the struggle state. You can ask, what part of this process usually creates the biggest headache? What is the most frustrating part? Where do things usually go wrong? What is unreliable in the current setup? What takes more time than it should? What creates the most risk? And then you stop talking. This is important. Do not help them. Do not suggest answers. Do not say, is it price? Is it logistics? Is it quality? Is it suppliers? Let them explain. Silence is your friend. Very often the best answer comes from a few seconds of thinking. If you fill the silence, you kill the inside. Step 4. Ask for a recent example. This is one of the most important questions in buyer research because opinions are easy, stories are valuable. If someone says logistics is always a problem, do not immediately pitch your logistics solution. Ask, can you give me a recent example? If someone says our current supplier is unreliable, ask what exactly happened. Recent examples show you the real behavior. They show you the actual sequence. They show you who was involved. They show you what broke. They show you how painful the problem really was. And they show you whether the problem is urgent enough to matter. That is one of the biggest differences between weak and strong market discovery. Weak discovery asks, would you be interested? Strong discovery asks, what happened last time? Step 5. Ask what happens when the problem occurs. This is where you understand the cost of the struggle state. Because a problem without a consequence is not a real buying trigger. If the buyer says, sometimes delivery is delayed, you need to understand. So what happens when delivery is delayed? Does production stop? Does the consumer complain? Does the company lose money? Does the warehouse get blocked? Does someone internally get blamed? Does the buyer need to find emergency supply? Does it create extra cost? Does it damage trust with their own customer? And so on. This is where the real value is, because buyers do not pay to remove abstract problems. They pay to avoid consequences. They pay to reduce risk. They pay to make progress. They pay to move from the struggle state to the progress state. Step 6. Listen for recurring pain words. This is very important. When you are speaking with a potential buyer, listen carefully for words like always, every time, constantly, regularly, often, and so on. These words usually point to recurring pain, and recurring pain is much more valuable than a one-time inconvenience. If someone says, this always creates problems, stop. Ask, why does that happen? How often does it happen? How much time does it cost? Who is involved? What does it affect? Ask about the current process, biggest headaches, recent examples, consequences, and then pay special attention to words like always, every time, constantly, regularly, and often. Because these words are signals. They show you where the buyer may be living in a struggle state. And that is what you want to find out. Step 7. Only after diagnosis, decide whether your product or service is relevant. This is the part many people skip. They hear a small problem and immediately jump into selling. But you should not do that. Your job is not to force your offer into every conversation. Your job is to understand whether there is a real fit. Sometimes there is, sometimes there's not. And that is absolutely fine, that's normal. Because when there is a fit, your offer becomes much stronger. Now you're not saying, please buy from us. You're saying, Based on what you told me, it sounds like the main issue is this. You're currently dealing with this situation, it creates these consequences, and ideally, you want to achieve this outcome. We might be able to help you with that. That sounds completely different, right? Because now the buyer feels understood. And when the buyer feels understood, resistance goes down, trust goes up, and the conversation becomes commercial in a natural way. This is especially important in international trade because international trade is not only about product and price. It is about trust, it is about execution, about risk, about timing, about documentation, about communication, about whether the other side believes you can actually deliver what you promise. Many beginners in international trade think the biggest problem is, I don't know what product to sell. But often the bigger problem is, I do not understand what real buyers actually need badly enough to act. Many active operators think the problem is, I need more deals. But often the bigger problem is, I'm not turning conversations into trust because I'm pitching before diagnosing. And many established import-export company founders think the problem is we need more opportunities. But often the deeper problem is our deal generation still depends too much on personal relationships, random situations, and founder involvement. If you have no clear buyer, no proven demand, and you're afraid of making expensive mistakes, and you want to complete your first safe, profitable international deal and understand the process, if you have products, suppliers, or some experience, but buyer acquisition is unreliable and conversations do not move forward, instead you want to identify demand, speak with real buyers, qualify opportunities, and execute deals more consistently, or if you even can do deals, but growth depends too much on you as the founder, your contacts, and one-off opportunities, and you want to have a repeatable system for generating, qualifying, and executing profitable trade deals, the struggle state and progress state framework works across different levels and different situations. It follows the same principle. Do not start with the product, start with the struggle. Do not assume the solution, understand the progress. And this brings us to the most important insight of the entire video. People do not buy products. They hire products, suppliers, traders, sourcing partners, manufacturers, and service providers to help them make progress. A buyer does not buy steel, chemicals, machines, food products, spare parts, packaging, or sourcing services just because those things exist. They buy because something in their world needs to change. Something is too expensive, too slow, too risky, too unreliable, too dependent on one supplier, too difficult to manage, too exposed to failure. And if you do not understand what needs to change, your offer is just noise. But if you understand the buyer's struggle state and their progress state, your offer becomes a bridge. You are no longer just another person trying to sell something. You become someone who understands where they are, where they want to go, and what may help them get there. This is how real trust starts. That is how serious conversations start. And that is how sustainable trade flows are built. So let's summarize. In this video, we discussed 5 things. First, most exporters, traders, and sourcing companies approach buyers too early with a product, catalog, or offer. Second, buyers already receive too much noise and they do not wake up thinking about your product. Third, in international trade, trust is created when the buyer feels understood, not when you claim to be reliable. Fourth, your real job is to diagnose the buyer's struggle state and progress state. And fifth, the practical way to do that is simple. Do not open with your offer, open with curiosity. Ask how they currently solve the problem. Ask what is difficult or frustrating. Ask for a recent example. Ask what happens when the problem occurs. Listen for recurring pain words like always, every time, constantly, regularly, and often. And only after diagnosis, decide whether your product or service is relevant. If you take one thing from this video, take this: stop pitching, start diagnosing. Because the goal is not to make the buyer hear your offer. The goal is to make the buyer feel understood. And one final thing, at the moment, I'm conducting research to better understand the challenges entrepreneurs face when launching and growing international trade businesses. If you're currently trying to build an import-export business, find buyers, validate demand, execute or scale international trade deals, I'd genuinely be interested to hear your perspective. You'll find my contact details below this video. This is purely for research purposes. And if you found this video useful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for being with us. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.